Why are there two columns in the Spanish flag? Where do they come from? What do they have to do with the dollar sign? To answer these questions, we must go back into the past and dive into Spanish's proto-history. And what is proto-history, you may ask? Proto-history is an intermediate stage between prehistory and history. What made history start was the invention of written word in Mesopotamia back in the year 3200 BC. But this invention didn't reach the other parts of the world immediately. Thus, some countries, like Spain, remained in prehistory. Some people that already knew how to write, like the Greeks, started sailing and exploring the Mediterranean, describing the lands and peoples they found on their journeys. This way, we begin to have written accounts about the Iberian Peninsula, but from indirect sources, people who didn't live there. And that is proto-history, having information about a country told by people from outside. The first accounts that we have about Spain are the periplus, which means to navigate around in Greek. Periplus are exploration journeys made by expert Greek sailors. The first one that mentions the Iberian Peninsula was a periplus that followed the tin route, from eastern Mediterranean to the British Islands, passing through Spain. Eastern Asia had copper in abundance, but they needed tin in order to produce bronze, and they found it in Spain and the British Isles. These first accounts call the Iberian Peninsula Hesperia or Ericeia, meaning land where the sun sets. This is because at that time, the Ecumene or known world by the Greeks were only those lands around the Mediterranean. They thought the world was more or less like this. So, if they sailed towards the setting sun, west, the last land they would encounter was Spain, and they firmly believed that there was nothing else but sea and monsters beyond there. This can be still noted on the name of some places in Spain, like El Cabo de Finisterre, which was believed to be the land most west of Europe by the Romans, thus the name, Finisterrae, end of the world. The Romans found there an Ara Solis, an altar to the sun built by the natives, and the Roman general Decimus Junius Brutus, after conquering Galicia and the north of Portugal, contemplated with horror how the sun was engulfed by the ocean, while a flaming blaze came out of it. Later, some Greek sailors took the bother to land and asked the peoples who lived in the Iberian Peninsula what was the name of their land, and they were told Iberia, which means river in the Iberian language, because their most important river was called Iber, nowadays the Ebro. So yeah, basically they called the river river. This way, Spain was called Iberia by the Greeks, and this name lasts until our days, leading to our modern name of Iberian Peninsula or the Jamón Ibérico. But let's get back to the point. What does this have to do with the columns in the Spanish flag? Well, apparently the Greeks liked Spain so much that they even made a legend about it. Or they just had myths to spare and legends about pretty much everything. And this legend involves the greatest Greek demigod hero, Hercules. Hercules had to do 12 labors in order to atone for the murder of his wife and kids. The 10th one involved stealing King Gerion's cattle of Red Bulls. King Gerion was king of Tartessos, an ancient kingdom located in the south of Spain. According to the legend, Gerion lived in the Hesperides Islands, at the mouth of Guadalquivir River, that was called Tartessos River at the time. Gerion was a giant with 3 separate torsos, each one with 2 arms and a head. I guess this was a major problem when he wanted to go somewhere. He also had a 2-headed dog called Orthrus, brother of the mythical dog Cerberus that had 3. He helped him shepherd his bulls at the riverside of the Guadalquivir. In order for Hercules to reach Spain, he had to cross the Strait of Gibraltar, the only link between the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, and the only point that prevents the Mediterranean from being just a very big lake. The Greeks believed that beyond that point was nothing but ocean, the end of the known world. Hercules decided to mark this point with 2 gigantic columns, one of each on top of the 2 closest mountains of the strait, Mount Gibraltar and Mount Hacho or Mount Musa in other versions. Some even say that these mounts are the actual remains of the columns, which were supposed to be huge. The columns were marked with an inscription that read Non plus ultra, Latin for nothing further beyond, though supposedly not written in Latin since Hercules was Greek. A warning for sailors to not sail towards the ocean past this point. The legend was so well known that everyone started calling Hercules' columns to the Gibraltar Strait, and it became a geographical term that could be seen in maps. Also, in Galicia we can see the Tower of Hercules, that stands in the spot in which, according to the legend, Hercules buried Gerion's heads, after defeating him with a single arrow that pierced his 3 hearts at the same time. It must have been a long journey though, because it's some 600 miles apart from the place they fought. This tower, by the way, is the oldest still functioning lighthouse, built in the 1st century AD by the Romans. Other versions of the legend say that Hercules actually was the one who created the Mediterranean Sea by separating the mountains and letting the water in, which doesn't really make sense, since he supposedly came to the Iberian Peninsula by boat, so the sea had to be there before he created it. Interestingly enough, in the 20th century, a German architect called Hermann Sorgel proposed the idea of creating a dam in the Gibraltar Strait, in order to regulate the amount of water coming in from the Atlantic Ocean, allowing the emergence of new lands, since they were worried about Europe's overpopulation and food scarcity. This dam would also provide enough hydroelectrical energy to feed the whole Europe, and would unite Africa and Europe, creating a new continent which he proposed to be called Atlantropa. The project, as you may have imagined, didn't prosper due to the obvious economic, political, and environmental problems it would have to face. Returning to the legend of the columns, later, during the 16th century, the Spanish king and German emperor Charles V decided to add these columns to his coat of arms, but removing the "nun" from the inscription, because it wasn't true anymore, since America had been discovered 25 years before by Christopher Columbus, who sailed for the Spanish Catholic kings Isabel and Fernando, who were Charles's grandparents. Charles included the columns with the inscription plus ultra, farther beyond, to remind that now you could go further beyond thanks to the Spanish discovery. The columns became the symbol of the New World and stayed in many American and Spanish institutions up to the present day, where it can be seen in the modern Spanish flag. During the 15th century, the Spanish crown created a silver coin named Real de Ocho, called like this because it was the equivalent to 8 reales, a smaller silver coin. The Real de Ocho portrayed the 2 columns of Hercules in its tails, since most of them were coined in America, thanks to the great amount of silver the Spanish found there, especially in the Cerro Rico of Potosí, in Bolivia. Modern calculations say that 4/5 of the world's silver production from 1500 to 1800 came from Spanish America. During the 16th and 17th centuries, the Spanish Empire became the most powerful empire of the world, and this coin became very popular thanks to its reliability and its high amount of silver. It weighed an ounce and had a 93% of pure silver. Also, Spain was the first global empire, meaning that it was the first one to have possessions in every continent, the empire where the sun never set. This way, the Real de Ocho was used worldwide by all countries, becoming the first global currency, and, for example, Chinese merchants would only accept Spanish silver from European merchants. Many coins were marked with Chinese signs to indicate its good quality. Also, Reales de Ocho were often chopped to make smaller coins, or overstamped to be used in other countries. The Real de Ocho was used in all of America, including the English and French areas, and when the United States became independent, they adopted the Real de Ocho in 1785 as the official currency, up until 1857, receiving the name of Spanish dollar, as we can read in the Coinage Act of 1792, stating that the US dollar should have the value of a Spanish mill dollar as the same is now current. The name dollar comes from its similarity to the Austrian thaler, a coin that also had a great amount of silver, although it was less popular than the Spanish dollar. And this is where the modern dollar sign comes from, which is in reality a simplification of the 2 columns wrapped in the plus ultra ribbon. Other theories suggest that it comes from the abbreviation of the word peso, another name to refer to the Spanish dollar, peso meaning literally weight in Spanish, being this coin the standard weight for transactions. The abbreviation of peso, PS, can be found in many commercial documents from the 18th century, often with the 2 letters overlapping, thus creating the dollar sign. This is the reason why many American coins are still called peso, and almost all of them use the dollar sign, since the Spanish Real de Ocho was used by most of the republics of Hispanic America after they became independent. Interestingly enough, until 1997, the price of the stock market of the US was parted in eighths of dollar, reminding the original partition of the Real de Ocho. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you liked it.